thick, not just with the impending chill of autumn, but with the palpable, suffocating tension. This week, the village becomes a pressure cooker where secrets boil over, and fatal arrows shatter lives beyond repair. From a devastating hit and run that threatens to consume one resident whole, to the perilous exposure of a double life in the terrifying grip of suspicion and kidnapping, the tranquility of the Dales is violently ripped away. Prepare for 5 days where every choice is a dangerous gamble, and the emotional fallout is absolute. The moment Robert Sugden stepped through the door of his home, a wave of cold, clammy guilt washed over him, a physical sensation that tightened his chest like a vice. He had perfected the art of compartmentalization, the ability to live two distinct, opposing lives without them bleeding into one another. But the dam was beginning to crack. He stood in the hallway, the scent of the home he shared with Victoria, a fragrance of lavender and domestic comfort, suddenly feeling like a lie wrapped around him. His hand trembled faintly as he adjusted his collar, a meaningless gesture given the seismic shift happening beneath his seemingly composed exterior. His phone, a dangerous nexus of deceit, was tucked deep into his inner jacket pocket, vibrating with the silent promise of a rendezvous. Robert's double life begins to unfold not with a grand, dramatic flourish, but with a series of small, calculated lies and evasions. It wasn't just the thrill of the other relationship that pulled him, but a deeper, more profound need for a part of himself he had long suppressed, a wilder, unconstrained freedom that Victoria, for all her unwavering love and stability, could never truly provide. He had tasted that life, that intoxicating recklessness, and now, the mundane reality of his marriage felt like a cage constructed of good intentions. Every loving glance Victoria cast his way, every casual, familiar touch, was a fresh stab of guilt, sharpening the edges of his secret. He was performing, wearing the mask of the devoted husband, but the strain was beginning to etch itself around his eyes, lines of exhaustion and moral fatigue. The duality was tearing him apart, yet he lacked the moral fortitude to dismantle either world. He was addicted to the risk, the profound, shocking danger of living on a knife edge. The air outside a discreet pub on the outskirts of Houghton was crisp, carrying the distant, low thrum of traffic, a stark contrast to the quiet drama unfolding inside. Kev makes his presence felt immediately and dramatically, not through shouting or accusation, but through an almost unbearable stillness. He was waiting at a corner table, his posture radiating a quiet, unwavering confidence that unsettled Robert more than any hostility could. Kev's eyes, dark and knowing, locked onto Robert's the moment he entered. There was no need for words, no need for the usual pleasantries that cushioned less serious encounters. This was raw, elemental connection, a relationship built on unspoken understandings and explosive, reckless passion. Kev was the living, breathing manifestation of everything Robert was fighting to keep hidden, the physical embodiment of his buried desire. "You took your time," Kev murmured, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that nonetheless felt like a shout in Robert's ear. The comment was loaded, heavy with history and impatience. Robert felt his carefully constructed walls crumble under the intensity of that gaze. Kev wasn't just an affair, he was a mirror reflecting the man Robert truly was, or at least the man he secretly craved to be. The scene between them was a masterclass in suppressed energy, a silent battleground of attraction and imminent danger. Every touch of Kev's hand on the table, every shift in his weight, was an unspoken demand for Robert's time, his attention, his soul. Kev was staking his claim, and Robert, weak-kneed with a mix of fear and longing, was powerless to resist. Later that day, the deceit reaches a suffocating peak of anxiety. Robert watches the encounter unfold, but it's not the encounter with Kev that holds his attention, it's the interaction he witnesses between Victoria and one of her friends, perhaps a casual, innocent chat about the future, or a shared joke that underscores the simple, uncomplicated happiness he is actively jeopardizing. He stands hidden behind a thick hedge near the local cafe, the rough, dry leaves scratching lightly against his coat, an analogy for the constant, irritating discomfort of his conscience. From this vantage point, he observes Victoria. She is radiant, unsuspecting, discussing plans for a weekend trip, perhaps, or a simple renovation of their garden. Her laughter, usually a bright, resonant sound that settled his nerves, now strikes him as painfully discordant, a joyous melody played over the thrumming bass of his betrayal. His heart hammers against his ribs. He is an outsider looking into his own life, a voyeur of the happiness he pretends to sustain. The observation isn't driven by jealousy, but by a crippling self-loathing. He sees the goodness in Victoria, the purity of her commitment, and it magnifies the squalor of his own actions. He is watching not just an encounter, but the future he is slowly, deliberately dismantling. The question isn't if the secret will explode, but when, and how catastrophic the fallout will be. Robert's eyes are wide, strained, a desperate prayer forming silently on his lips for the ground to swallow him whole. Meanwhile, away from Robert's self-inflicted misery, Dawn Taylor faces a different kind of storm, one that strikes her from the outside, cold and merciless. Dawn deals with some news delivered via a curt, formal phone call, the sterile tone of the voice on the other end a brutal counterpoint to the devastating information being conveyed. Perhaps it's a legal verdict regarding custody of her child, or a crucial development concerning her father's past, or even a sudden, debilitating medical diagnosis for a loved one. The nature of the news is not explicitly stated, but its gravity is clear in the way Dawn's face drains of all color, leaving her skin a ghastly, ashen shade. She stands frozen in the middle of her tiny kitchen, the phone slipping slowly from her numb fingers to clatter harmlessly onto the worn linoleum floor. The silence that follows is deafening, punctuated only by the ragged, shallow sound of her own breathing. Her mind, usually sharp and quick, scrambles to process the implications. This news isn't just a setback, it's a monumental obstacle, a potential derailment of the fragile stability she has worked so desperately to build. Tears, hot and immediate, well up in her eyes, not tears of simple sadness, but of overwhelming despair and fury at the cruel hand of fate. She sinks onto a chair, burying her face in her hands, the rough texture of her palms a small, grounding reality against the chaos of her internal world. The news forces a terrifying, immediate choice upon her, a decision that will define her future and test the limits of her endurance. She has fought too long, too hard, to let this piece of devastating information dictate her surrender. The fight is on, but the odds are terrifyingly stacked against her. The shadow of disaster begins to fall darkest over Joe Tate. Joe is unhappy, an understatement that fails to capture the tempest of stress and resentment brewing within him. His unhappiness is a slow, corrosive poison, stemming from mounting financial pressures and a deep-seated, restless dissatisfaction with his current trajectory. He is trapped in his own office, a minimalist space that now feels like a luxurious, glass-walled prison. He paces the length of the room, running a frustrated hand through his meticulously styled hair. The source of his immediate distress is a series of failed business deals or perhaps a blackmail attempt that has left him bleeding money and credibility. The high-stakes world he inhabits demands ruthlessness, but Joe feels a vulnerability he hasn't anticipated. His anger isn't directed outward, but inward, towards his own perceived failures. He slams his fist onto the mahogany desk, the sharp, hollow sound echoing the emptiness he feels inside. The resentment bleeds into his personal life, making him short-tempered and distant. He needs a win, a decisive victory to reassert control, and that desperation pushes him towards reckless behavior. The weight of expectation is crushing him. He stares out the window at the familiar landscape of Emmerdale, seeing not beauty, but a world that is slowly closing in. This profound unhappiness, this intense need to escape his own head, is the dark, heavy atmosphere that precedes his fateful drive, setting the psychological stage for the terrible incident to come. His agitation is a dangerous cocktail, ready to ignite with the slightest spark of misfortune. The morning of Tuesday dawns gray and miserable, mirroring Joe Tate's volatile mood. The air is damp, the road surface is slick with a thin film of recent rain. Joe is behind the wheel of his high-performance vehicle, the powerful engine a deceptive purr beneath his agitated hands. He isn't driving for pleasure, he's driving to escape the suffocating walls of his office and the relentless, critical voice in his head. Joe loses concentration while driving, but it's not due to a physical distraction. His mind is a swirling maelstrom of financial figures, threats, and his own gnawing unhappiness. He replays the disastrous meeting from the previous day, the sharp, insulting words of a rival echoing in his ears. His focus is entirely internal, miles away from the winding country road he is navigating. He grips the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles are white, his jaw clenched. He shouldn't be driving in this state, but his need for speed, for the brief, violent adrenaline rush that masks his emotional pain, overrides all caution. He speeds past a warning sign without seeing it, his attention fixated on a mental calculation, a desperate bid to claw back his losses. The music on the stereo is loud, aggressive, a soundtrack to his inner turmoil. His eyes dart momentarily to the passenger seat where his phone vibrates with yet another irritating notification, a message that confirms his worst fears about a pending deal. That momentary flicker of attention is all it takes. The critical separation between his internal and external world collapses. In that microsecond of distraction, the world outside snaps back into brutal, shocking clarity. The sudden, horrifying appearance of a figure stepping out from behind a parked van is all Joe registers, a fleeting image of a familiar silhouette, a burst of movement where there should be none. He doesn't have time to process the identity, only the terrifying imminence of the collision. His foot slams down on the brake pedal, a primal, reflexive action, but the wet road, the speed, and the sheer momentum of the car betray him. The screech of the tires is a high-pitched, desperate shriek that rips through the damp morning air, a sound of tearing metal and shattered control. Then comes the sickening, dull thud, a sound that is simultaneously muffled and shockingly visceral, a sound that Joe knows, with a horrifying, gut-wrenching certainty, he will never forget. It's the sound of Jimmy King, sent sprawling into the unforgiving asphalt. The impact is not a grand, cinematic explosion, but a quick, ugly, devastating jolt that vibrates through the expensive chassis, straight into Joe's trembling bones. Joe's car fishtails violently, narrowly avoiding a ditch, before shuddering to a violent, absolute stop 100 yards down the road. The silence that follows is thicker, heavier, and infinitely more terrifying than the screeching had been. The steam rising from the hood of the car smells metallic, acrid, like failure and impending doom. Joe is frozen. His breath hitches in his throat, a ragged, useless gasp. He stares through the cracked windshield, a jagged web of splintered glass that mirrors the sudden fracture in his reality. The instinct to flee is immediate and overwhelming, a pure, adrenaline-fueled panic response screaming in his ears, "Drive! Get away!" No one saw. But a more fundamental, human terror forces him to move. He fumbles with the seatbelt buckle, his hands shaking so violently he can barely perform the simple action. He throws the door open and stumbles out into the road, the sudden cold air a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the car's interior. He runs back towards the crumpled figure on the street. Joe is desperate. He drops to his knees beside the prone, terrifyingly still body of Jimmy King. The blood bright, slick, and horrifying is already blooming on the gray tarmac around Jimmy's head. Jimmy's face is pale, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow and rattling. "Jimmy! Jimmy, wake up!" Joe whispers, the sound cracking with raw terror. He reaches out a trembling hand, then pulls it back, afraid to touch, afraid to confirm the irreversible damage he has caused. The sheer gravity of his actions, the potential for murder, for manslaughter, slams into him with the force of his own car. This isn't a bad business deal, this is human life, ruined by his momentary, selfish distraction. He looks frantically up and down the road. Empty. Silent. The desolation is absolute, offering no help, only the damning privacy of a crime scene. Joe makes a split-second decision that will haunt him forever. The desperation wins. He can't call for help, he can't face the consequences. He glances one last time at Jimmy, a silent, terror-stricken apology, before scrambling back to his car, heart pounding, adrenaline blinding him to everything but escape. Unknown to Joe, the deserted road was not entirely private. Hidden in the shadows of a nearby lane, watching from the cab of his stationary van, Caleb witnesses the incident. Caleb Dingle wasn't looking for trouble, he was merely pausing to take a private call related to one of his shadier deals, his mind focused on profit margins and loopholes. The sudden, violent screech of tires forces his head up. He watches the entire, sickening sequence unfold in a single, horrifying frame, the blur of Joe's expensive car, the figure sent flying, and the terrible silence that follows. His eyes, sharp and calculating, immediately fix on Joe Tate. He sees the panic, the desperation, the moment Joe chooses to flee. Caleb doesn't react with shock or pity, but with a cold, predatory recognition of opportunity. The incident is not a tragedy to Caleb, it is a weapon. He remains utterly still in his cab, allowing the powerful roar of Joe's accelerating engine to fade into the distance. He pulls out his own phone, not to call the emergency services. Jimmy is not his problem, but to surreptitiously film the license plate and the fleeing vehicle. The recording is quick, steady, and damning. Caleb, a master of leverage and exploitation, knows exactly what he has just acquired: ownership of Joe Tate. The price will be steep, exacted in silence, power, and cash. A slow, chilling smile spreads across Caleb's face. This wasn't misfortune, it was a gift. Back in the village, the domestic facade of Robert's life continues to crumble. Victoria continues to pressure Robert, her patience worn threadbare by his recent emotional withdrawal and secretive behavior. They are in their living room, the atmosphere thick with unspoken accusations. Victoria isn't shouting, her anger is expressed through a quiet, steady, relentless questioning that is far more unnerving. She holds a damp tea towel, twisting it ceaselessly in her hands, a reflection of her own internal turmoil. "It's the constant lying, Robert," she says, her voice low and dangerously controlled. "I don't even know what I'm questioning anymore. Is it business? Is it money? Or is it something else entirely? Just tell me what you're hiding. You look at me like a ghost." Robert tries to deflect, to manufacture an argument about stress, about work. "It's the pressure, Vic. I told you. The deals are going south now." Victoria cuts him off, her eyes blazing with hard-won certainty. "That's not it. You have that look. The look you get when you're about to burn your whole life down. I need a decision, Robert. I need you to commit to this, to me, or let me go. I can't keep living with this half-presence, this constant, terrible doubt." She takes a step closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. The pressure is a demand for honesty, a plea for him to choose a path, any path, over the torturous limbo he has created. Cornered and emotionally exhausted by Victoria's demands, Robert does what he does best: he defaults to the path of least resistance and greatest self-sabotage. He refuses to break the spell of the secret life. He looks at Victoria, his eyes filled with a counterfeit sincerity, a desperate attempt to pacify her. "You're right," he murmurs, pulling her into a tight, slightly rigid embrace. "I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. I'll fix this. I'll cancel that trip I mentioned. We need time, just us." But as he holds her, his mind is already elsewhere. Victoria's intensity has merely reinforced his flight reflex. Instead of choosing her, Robert makes a decision to plunge deeper into his deception. He sees Kev's face, the promise of passion, the intoxicating freedom from responsibility. He resolves to arrange another, riskier meeting, a defiant act against the suffocating boundaries of his current life. The decision is a silent, devastating betrayal, sealing his fate and ensuring the eventual, explosive confrontation with Victoria. He has chosen the quick, fiery release over the slow, painful work of truth. In a stark contrast of emotional tone, the Dingle homestead offers a momentary, if slightly awkward, scene of celebration. Patty gives Dylan a gift, a token of pride and affection that attempts to inject some much-needed lightness into the troubled family dynamics. Patty is beaming, his face alight with genuine, fatherly pride. He stands in the messy, comforting chaos of the Dingle kitchen, holding out a keyring attached to a gleaming, high-tech fob. "There you go, son," Patty announces, his voice ringing with warmth. "You smashed it. Passed with flying colors." The gift is clearly expensive, a gesture that goes beyond a simple congratulation. Dylan, usually sullen and detached, is momentarily stunned, a rare flicker of genuine happiness crossing his young face as he takes the key. Patty explains it's Dylan's reward for passing his driving test, emphasizing the effort and dedication Dylan has shown. "I know things haven't been easy, kid," Patty says, his tone softening, "but this is massive. This is freedom. Independence. You earned it. Use it wisely, all right? It's not just a car, it's trust." Patty's words carry the weight of his own hopes for Dylan's future, a silent prayer that this milestone represents a turning point away from any trouble. The gesture is loaded with love, but also with Patty's own complicated emotional history and a desperate desire to ensure Dylan is safe and provided for. The key, innocently given, feels like a monumental offering of faith. Observing this exchange from the doorway, arms crossed, is Claudette. Claudette is shocked, and her disapproval is a palpable, almost suffocating presence in the room. Her shock is not at Dylan's success, but at the sheer extravagance and timing of Patty's generosity, especially given their own precarious financial situation or perhaps the history of Dylan's irresponsibility. "Patty, honestly," Claudette exclaims, her voice sharp with thinly veiled criticism. "A brand new car? After all he's done? That is not a reward, that is enabling. It's too much, too soon. Have you thought this through? Or are you just trying to buy his approval?" Her words hang heavy in the air, instantly poisoning the celebratory mood. Patty's face falls, the joy draining out of him, replaced by familiar guilt and defensiveness. Dylan, clutching the car key, instantly retreats behind his usual defensive facade, the moment of happiness shattered. Claudette's shock and judgment serve as an unwelcome reminder that even the simplest, most loving gestures can be weaponized in a fractured family dynamic. The gift of freedom suddenly feels like a dangerous, ill-advised tool. The gravity of Joe Tate's situation hits its terrifying peak on Wednesday. The night has been sleepless, filled with the terrifying imagery of Jimmy King's still body. Now, the fear is compounded by the sickening knowledge that Caleb Dingle holds the ultimate, damning evidence. Joe drives, not to his plush office, but to a desolate, windswept warehouse district on the edge of the village, a landscape as morally gray and unforgiving as the deal he is about to strike. He parks his now dented car discreetly, the evidence of the accident a constant, throbbing reminder of his crime. He walks into the vast, echoing warehouse. The air is cold and smells of dust and damp concrete. Joe goes to the warehouse to sort things out with Caleb, his heart hammering a frantic, desperate rhythm against his ribs. He finds Caleb leaning against a stack of crates, his posture relaxed, his expression chillingly devoid of emotion. Caleb doesn't need to speak to convey his power, it emanates from him in waves. "I know what you want," Joe grits out, bypassing pleasantries. His voice is tight, strained. "How much? Name your price. It's what you were waiting for, wasn't it?" Caleb smiles, a slow, wolfish curve of his lips that sends a shiver down Joe's spine. "Price? Joe, my boy, this isn't about cash. This is about loyalty. This is about ownership." Caleb reveals his terms, a far more insidious and long-lasting form of payment than a simple check. He wants Joe's influence, his connections, his blind obedience in a high-stakes, potentially illegal venture. The video of the accident is not just insurance, it's a leash, and Joe Tate is now firmly in Caleb's control. The warehouse, cold and vast, has become the site of a permanent, soul-destroying contract. Peeled back in the village's underbelly, the drama shifts to a shocking act of violence that is swift, brutal, and terrifyingly efficient. In a quiet, residential cul-de-sac, a young woman named Anya is going about her day, perhaps locking up her small flat or returning from the shops, her mind on mundane things. The ambush is instantaneous. From a dark-colored, unmarked van that pulls up silently to the curb, two masked figures emerge with chilling speed. A woman named Anya is kidnapped. She barely has time to register the metallic taste of fear before a rough hand clamps over her mouth, stifling her terrified scream. She struggles violently, a brief, desperate flurry of resistance, but the figures are strong, professional, and merciless. Her decision may be to leave, to pack her bags and demand space, or perhaps, far more dramatically, to tell a shocking, self-incriminating lie about her own actions in a bid to shift the blame and force Vinny to open up. The decision is abrupt, shocking, and guarantees a massive, agonizing upheaval in her young marriage. The kidnapping of Anya galvanizes Ruby's resolve. The sheer injustice and the thought of a young woman being held captive ignites a fierce fire within her. Ruby is determined to help Anya. She doesn't go to the police. She knows that in the criminal undercurrent of Emmerdale, the police often move too slowly, or worse, are compromised. Ruby opts for a riskier, more direct approach. She begins her own private investigation, relying on her street smarts and connections. She interviews the few people who might have been near the scene, meticulously piecing together the description of the van, the figures, and the time. She understands the stakes Anya is a pawn in a larger game, and time is running out. Ruby's determination is fierce, leading her to make reckless calls, to step into dangerous territory, and to rely on people she can barely trust. Her journey is fraught with peril, transforming her from an observer into an active participant in a high-stakes rescue mission. The web of crime and coercion tightens its grip on the younger generation. Under the unrelenting, cold-eyed pressure of Ray, the local villain, Dylan finds himself spiraling deeper into a world he is ill-equipped to navigate. Despite the recent gift of the car from Patty, which ironically only serves to increase his perceived value to Ray, Dylan is tense, pale, and deeply afraid. His task this time is more complex, more high-risk, and requires him to use the very independence his father gifted him. Dylan completes another task for Ray. The task involves a calculated intrusion, perhaps breaking into a rival's storage unit, or delivering a crucial, incriminating package to an anonymous contact. Dylan is a mass of nerves, constantly glancing over his shoulder, the key to his new car feeling heavy and damning in his hand. He meticulously follows Ray's instructions, his youthful face etched with the strain of fear and moral conflict. He performs the task with a desperate efficiency, every movement mechanical, every breath shallow. He is terrified of Ray, terrified of being caught, and, most crushingly, terrified of disappointing his father. He completes the handover in a secluded area, the transaction swift and silent, leaving him with a sick, clammy feeling of absolute moral compromise. He is now too deeply entrenched to turn back, convinced that one more task is all it will take to be free. Just as Dylan believes he has successfully slipped back into the shadows, the entire criminal facade shatters around him in a blinding flash of exposure. He is walking away from the scene of the handover, adjusting his jacket, trying to calm his racing heart, when the worst possible thing happens. Jai Sharma, perhaps on a late-night delivery run, or simply passing by on an uncharacteristic route, sees a figure he instantly recognizes as Dylan, exchanging words and a small, suspicious package with a shady, older man before the two quickly separate. Jai stops his vehicle, his eyes wide with a confusion that instantly morphs into disbelief and then cold fury. He watches Dylan, whose guilt is written plainly on his face, attempting to hurry away. "Dylan, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Jai's voice booms across the empty street, raw with shock and accusation. Dylan freezes, the blood draining from his face, leaving him utterly exposed. His world collapses into that single, horrified moment. He spins around, seeing Jai, the one person whose authority he fears and respects, after Patty standing there, having witnessed his crime. The confrontation is immediate and devastating. Dylan tries to stammer an excuse, a denial, but the words catch uselessly in his throat. Jai approaches, his steps measured and heavy, his expression a mixture of profound disappointment and rising anger. This is the climactic moment of the week. Jai has caught a crucial player in Ray's operation, placing himself in immediate, grave danger while simultaneously acquiring the knowledge that could destroy the Dingle family. The entire week of escalating crises, Joe's accident, Robert's betrayal, Gabby's suspicion, and Anya's kidnapping all converge on this single, tense confrontation. Dylan is trapped, his secret life exposed, and the consequences of Ray's manipulation are about to rain down upon Emmerdale with brutal, unrelenting force. The week's relentless cascade of dramatic events, while crafted for maximum viewer engagement, transcends mere escapism. It is in the harrowing, high-stakes crises and the intimate, morally compromised decisions that the series finds its profound educational value. This is not a dry lecture, it is a vivid, visceral exploration of universal human experiences, mirroring real-world complexities that viewers often grapple with. The accidental hit and run committed by Joe Tate is more than a plot device. It is a chilling study in the psychological burden of guilt, the immediate, paralyzing terror of consequence, and the corrosive nature of a cover-up. It offers a powerful, implicit lesson on accountability, the lethal danger of distracted driving, and how a moment of unhappiness and negligence can irrevocably shatter lives, a cautionary narrative far more impactful than any public service announcement. Furthermore, Robert Sugden's agonizing descent into a double life, climaxing in a public, exposed moment of passion, provides a nuanced, emotionally charged exploration of identity, sexual fluidity, and the destructive power of societal pressure. It educates viewers not just on the mechanics of infidelity, but on the profound damage caused by secrecy, the difficult path toward self-acceptance, and the painful necessity of being true to oneself, even when that truth hurts. The scene where Victoria continues to pressure Robert and forces him to make a decision illustrates the dynamics of a breakdown in trust, offering viewers a lens through which to examine their own relationships, boundaries, and demands for honesty. Simultaneously, the high-octane tension, the unexpected twists, and the carefully crafted suspense serve a powerful entertainment value. The swift, shocking kidnapping of Anya and the immediate, fierce response of Ruby, determined to help, inject a pulse-racing element of crime thriller into the narrative. This escapism, however, is deeply rooted in relatable human courage and fear, making the suspense compelling rather than hollow. The core value of this content lies in its ability to seamlessly weave these two threads, providing gripping, addictive viewing while simultaneously holding up a mirror to the viewer's world. The exposure of Dylan's coerced involvement with Ray culminating in eye-catching Dylan in the act is a deeply affecting portrayal of how vulnerable young people can be drawn into criminality by fear and manipulation, prompting empathy and discussion around social issues. The audience is not just entertained by the shocking cliffhangers, they are emotionally invested in the moral struggles, finding both a thrilling temporary escape from their own reality and a profound, often uncomfortable, reflection of it. This fusion of moral weight and sheer dramatic force is the enduring brilliance of long-running serial drama.